Oliver Pijuan Luthier here, and I'm going to bend some ebony sides for this ukulele that I'm building right now. And the way I do that is I generally get a fretboard, ebony fretboard, and from Stumac or some other luthier source, and I glue a piece of maple veneer to one side, and then I rip the pieces out like this, the strips out, that will then become the bindings. The reason for the maple on the side is because it's a very thin piece. It's only a 64th of an inch thick, and to bend that sideways on the edge would be very difficult to do. So I just glue it on this, and this is the one occasion of gluing that veneer onto the ebony that I do use a heat-resistant glue, such as Titebond 3. That's the only application for that glue, is to do that. And the reason is that when you bend it with the heat, if you use hide glue or fish glue or even Titebond Type 1 to glue that veneer on, the heat and the moisture, because you need to have moisture, it'll cause it to come off. But that Titebond 3 holds it on pretty well. So we're going to take this strip and we're going to bend it to fit on the ukulele. I'm going to moisten it down. I just spray it down with a little water here. Ebony is pretty tough, so it takes a little moisture to bend it. And then I'm going to measure where the waist is going to be. And I know that the waist is about, from this piece, is going to be about 8.5 inches away from the end. And that gives me some extra room to play with. So it's right there. And this is a couple of inches longer than it needs to be, so I'm a little bit off. It's not a problem. So I'll start bending this. I have this bending iron set fairly high. It's set at 6 out of, I guess 8 is the highest it goes. And so I'm just got it on here, and I'm just gently rocking it back and forth on the iron, and until I get it to start to bend. And I start with that kind of the flatter portion of the iron to distribute the heat more fully through the whole length of the thing. And you can feel when it gets hot, it starts to go. And it's starting to do that now. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of gradually just letting it get pretty hot, and I'm just moving it around a little bit until I get into this other area where the curve is a little more extreme. And it's bending quite nicely. As you can see, I'm moving around this curve. Gotta rock it back and forth, make sure that the heat gets out into the areas that are a little more peripheral to the area that I'm bending. I'm going to add a little moisture to this. The heat actually steams the water into the wood. We'll get a little bit more bend here in the waist. The waist is the most critical part of the bend because it's the sharpest bend that you have. Let some heat really get in there. So there's a pretty good bend there in the waist now. Right there, you can see that's a pretty good bend. So what we're going to do is we're going to start bending the upper bout. I know I have a couple of extra inches on this, so I don't have to worry too much about getting the curve exactly perfect where I want to be at this point. We'll adjust that later when we start bending it into the form. So this is bending already, and at this point I'm just sort of estimating my curve, and we can check it against we're pretty close there. That's pretty close. It's going to need a little more, but we can actually work on that in a while. So I'll put a little more moisture on this thing, just keep it nice and wet. And we'll just do a little bit more here in the waist, because that waist is going to take a little bit more. But as we do these bouts, that curve that goes that way actually releases some of the fibers that are going into that tight bend in the waist. So it gives us a little bit more room to do this. These bindings are actually quite thick. They're about 1/8 of an inch thick, so they take a little patience and coaxing. We just have to coax them into where we want them to be. Okay, so this is really coming along nice here. That waist bend is really happening. So now let's work on the lower bout for a bit. A lot of people don't realize that the bindings on a guitar or a ukulele are very important for a number of reasons. They're not just decorative, but usually, well, at least the ukuleles I make have all either rosewood or ebony bindings. And rosewood and ebony are very strong, tough woods. And you want that on the corner of your instrument, so that if you bump it or something bumps into it, it's not going to damage the more delicate, thinner woods that are, of the soundboard or the sides. The sides are pretty thin, as is the soundboard. The soundboard on a ukulele is usually, the ones I make anyway, a little less than 2 millimeters thick, which is pretty thin. And so you want to protect that from... Okay, so now we've bent this and it looks kind of wild, but what we're going to do is tune it up by using the mold as a backer. So wet it down really well, and I've got half the mold right here. So I'm going to set this in here, and you can see that on that lower bout we've got a little more bending to do here, too much there. So we'll just make sure we get the waist in the right place, and to make sure that that stays somewhat stable, I'm going to put a clamp on it right there just to hold it. And then we're going to work on this lower bout by using this as a backer against the iron. Being careful not to get the plastic of the clamp against the hot iron, because it'll melt it. So you can hear it sizzling a little bit, the water. Does. You can see how nice that came out now, all that curvy wild stuff is pretty much gone. That little spring that we have there is no big deal. So now what we're going to do is work on the upper bout. So I'm going to move this clamp over to this side. You can see why I have these angles on the outside of my mold. It makes it so it's really easy to put clamps on if you're trying to hold things in place. You know, a lot of people use heat blankets and you know, these deals where they wrap them in foil and have a press that they press them into, which is fine. I just have a small shop, and I have never bent things that way. I've always bent things with an iron by hand. So here we go. We can see that we've got this really pretty nicely bent now, all the way around. It's really good. And there it is. We've got it nice bend in it. It's got a little spring back, but that won't be an issue because we're going to put it in this mold over here. Let's see if I can get this turned around so you can see what I'm doing over here. Yeah, okay. So this right here is the other half of the mold. I already bent the other pieces, so we're just going to clamp it in here and leave it overnight. So we'll just put this in here. And there we go. Put that other piece up on top. It'll hold it where we want it to be. Get them all in there, tucked in there nice. And clamp it down. And I clamp these little blocks on here to make sure that it stays true on the end where we're going to have to join it. And there it is. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I'm going to turn this off now. And if you have any comments or any questions, just leave them in the comments below, and I will respond as quickly as I can. Thank you.